We're good. Hi, everyone. John Boardman, CEO of Ballast. Thrilled that you all joined us today, and happy to be joined by my partners, two of them at least. Brian's not here today, but Andy Reynolds, who is our Chief Operating Officer and financial advocate, partner, financial planning guru. Cameron Hamilton, Director of Financial Planning, and also one of our partners and advocates. And we wanted to dig into a topic that we just published a white paper on, really around Roth dollars, which is seemingly a topic that so many people believe they fully understand, but we just think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about it. And so we wrote the article. It's had really good response, I think, a lot of questions that have come from that. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to just have a discussion about Roth and some of the ways that we implement it that maybe our clients have not considered. So why don't we start with you, Cameron, and just kind of talk about your inspiration for this and sort of the impetus to starting this.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason I wanted to write this article is just because I have a passion about Roth dollars, because we've been thinking about this for years, and we used to think about the math of it, and we see more and more each year. We see more situations where we believe it fits our clients. I've come to the perspective that I think almost anyone we meet, there's some place for Roth in their plan, and what we see in general is a very small minority of people are utilizing it. So it's way underutilized, and it's January. People are thinking about making plans. What can I do to better myself? Everyone's dusting off and starting to think about tax season. So it's the perfect time to just be considering, if I've been doing it, do I need to change how I'm doing it? And if I haven't considered it in the past, does it fit?
So let's look backwards on what you said about people utilizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? There are lots of reasons, I think, but talk through why we don't see that. I would guess when we meet with new people, maybe 25% or less, probably substantially less, actually have a Roth account.
Right.
Talk about historically why that may be, and why people still aren't using it.
Yeah, I mean, our clients, we have clients from 19 to well into their 90s, all across the board, but they kind of skew around retirement age. And I think when I think about what do those people think about Roth, they think of a lot of myths and misconceptions, which is Roth is for young people who don't earn a lot of money. And that goes back to the traditional math of it makes sense to pay tax now if we're in a low tax bracket. So that's for a college kid who's earning $5,000 in the summer, put all into a Roth. So they've traditionally heard, tell your kids to do a Roth IRA. And that's their extent of their knowledge about it. What we're finding is almost all of our clients have the ability to consider Roth savings as part of their plan. And I don't think they're utilizing it. So, part of that is the marketing towards young people, but also different reform has happened over the years that makes it fit even more of our clients. So it used to be there was an income limit on Roth conversions, and if we had over 100,000, we couldn't convert more than 100,000 at once. That got blown open in 2010, and how many people went and converted their whole Roths? And how many famous scenarios do we have about people who put company stock into Roth, and now they have $1 billion Roth IRAs? Secure Act was another reform a couple of years ago that forces retirement dollars out of IRAs in the next generation. And that makes our Roth planning that some people might have been on the fence for even more impactful, because now it's giving an extra advantage to the next generation. So it's just a combination of, is it for young people? And, is there an extra push for me to do it? I think makes them underutilized.
One thing I did fail to mention, if anybody has any questions on whatever platform that you're watching, I know we're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, feel free to post those questions. We'll try to answer those during this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
if not, we'll get back to you.
Absolutely.
I just want to chime in there too. I can remember you and I sitting down maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, with Excel documents. We're like, well, if tax rates do this, and if the market turns out, then Roth makes sense.
Right.
But I think really as we've thought and opened up our minds to it, there's so many more advantages.
Yeah.
Of Roth. It's not just the conception of, okay, I'm going to make more money later than I am now, so I'm in a lower tax bracket now. So
Right.
let me just go ahead and do Roth until I make X amount of money. I think, as we'll talk about today, there's so many more things. And I think another misconception also that a lot of people say is I make too much money to do a Roth.
Yeah.
To make Roth. And that's changed as well
Right.
from conversions. And if you have a Roth 401k versus Roth IRA, there's a difference between those as well.
It does feel like when Roth became available, it was clearly for low income earners. But if you look at the data, it tells us that when the income cap was removed, that huge waves of Roth money was converted, or traditional was converted to Roth, which tells us a little bit about sort of the planning expertise that goes behind, some of the conversations we're having with clients is, we're working with high net worth individuals, high income individuals who are converting significant balances. Now those dollars are living in this tax-free world. I mean, it's a world, that no other dollars get to exist in, where they don't have to pay tax on the gain, they don't have to pay tax on the distribution. It's hard when we look over the long term to not see how that's beneficial.
The thing about it from the government's perspective, when they're setting up this plan, they thought it was a benefit for young low earners.
Sure.
But from their perspective, they have these taxpayers who are giving them a steady stream of revenue forever. And they're selling that for the ability to take revenue right now. So when they're thinking, do we need to get rid of Roth? Well, that's income today that Congress is giving up. And Congress doesn't like giving up money right now.
They need that money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But we have the ability to opt into it. So that's complete adverse selection.
Absolutely.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, talk a little bit about also how we can utilize Roth. So we use this term really generally, Roth, and really talk about what Roth is and how you can access Roth.
Yeah, even very financially savvy people get confused, but Roth is just a tax qualification of money. So it's money that we've already paid tax on that's going to be tax-free forever. And there's basically three main ways that you can put money into a Roth bucket. So we can contribute it if we have income under 200,000 roughly for a married couple. We can put it straight into a Roth IRA. But if we're in a company retirement plan, there's no income limit. So today, 2022, we can put 20,500 into any bucket we want, and a lot of times we recommend people do Roth, even sometimes in higher tax brackets if it makes sense. So there's a big misconception. People think I'm a high earner, I can't contribute to a Roth. Almost all 401k plans, I'd say at least 75% of them I've seen in the last 10 years have a Roth option, and more of them do each year. So you can contribute to the Roth. We can also, if we don't have those options, still get money into a Roth IRA. So if you Google backdoor Roth, that's a really oversimplification of a process that's available by current law, and that has been a target for legislation last year, but we still have it, which is making a non-deductible IRA contribution and then deciding to convert that to Roth. So that's still on the table. But the big one I think is more relevant for most of our clients who are towards the later part of their career is the idea of converting. And by current law since 2010, there's no limit on the amount of conversion you can do in an IRA. And also some 401k plans have the ability to convert inside of them. So you could have a $2 million IRA, convert it all this year if you wanted to. Generally, we're not that extreme, but that's the concept.
You mentioned the retirement plans. For business owners out there, self-employed individuals who might have an individual 401k, it's not a difficult option to add to your plan. Or if you're in a small group, medical practice, law practice, whatever, adding that feature to a 401k usually costs nothing to do that. It's just simply changing the documents.
Yeah,
so most plans are adopting it if they haven't already.
Yeah. We had a client recently who was towards retirement, and they said, I thought about that, but I only have a few more years left. So what sense does it make to start this process? But from our perspective, say you're 60 and want to retire at 65, it's not a 5-year decision.
Right.
It's a 35 to 55 year decision.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to start thinking about it right now, because we're thinking about just tax buckets, taxable money, pre-tax money, Roth money, and any amount of diversification you can give us to plan, we're going to be able to present a better outcome for you.
Talk a little bit about just the narrative, that we try to have with clients. I think so many people, naturally so, they get caught up in the annual tax filing.
Yeah.
What am I going to owe? What is
Right.
my return going to be? And that often ends up driving a lot of these decisions around how they
Yeah.
save their money.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how we've evolved that narrative over time.
Yeah, we really just kind of try to flip that and reverse it. So, it's, am I paying more tax this year by deciding, for example, to do a Roth conversion? Yes. But really, I think about it as I'm prepaying tax for my future. When we think about our taxes going to go up in the future, we're at a relatively historically friendly marginal tax bracket scale. I personally like to do a lot of Roth savings in the company retirement plan because it's my belief that it'll probably cost more in the future, but even if it doesn't, I'm still accruing a big pot of tax-free money, and I'm not going to be sad about having that in the future.
Yeah.
But when you talk about how do we frame this conversation for our clients, it's really, let's get out of looking at 1 year, because in any one given year, obviously we want to pay minimal tax, and let's think about the whole life cycle and just try to minimize lifetime tax. And sometimes that means adding income to a year that otherwise could have been more tax friendly.
And I think you talk about you kind of alluded into some of the behavioral finance of Roth, but I think the two biggest things that in my mind have really convinced me or really it's the one biggest thing, but what's really convinced me about Roth is there's two variables really going in once you're retired. By the time you get to retirement and then you go into retirement, taxes,
Yeah.
market returns.
Yeah.
There are some other things there, but really those are your two main
Yeah.
things that are going to affect your outcome. And so if we can spread the taxes over time, maybe prepay some of those taxes, we're reducing some of our risk. The thing that I always try to tell people, and we all do, is, ultimately, if you retire and you have $1 million in pre-tax money and the IRS raises taxes, well, the next day you just lost purchasing power. And there's nothing, we couldn't control it, you couldn't control it, there's nothing we can do about it. So that's another big driver. And maybe next we'll talk about behavioral finance and the benefits of that. But a huge impact of Roth is just having some control
Bird in the
over your
hand.
future. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, one term you said there was purchasing power. And I think that's a great mindset for our clients to be in is, it doesn't matter what the balance of the account is. It's what can I spend if I want to take this money? And that's something I focus on with 401k savers who have a Roth option, because say we want to max out our plan, we're earning enough. If we feel like we can save that much, it's $20,500 regardless of if we do it pre-tax or Roth. So say you do that forever, and all of a sudden we have $1 million IRA, like you're saying. Is it $1 million of purchasing power, or is it 60% of that?
Well, that's a good point. Think there are a lot of variables that will be input to someone's financial life: inflation, their employment, market returns, just their health, all of the things that could impact when they might need to touch their money. So if we can create certainty in one of those variables being the tax liability, then we've eliminated something that could be a variable for the future. So I wholeheartedly agree. And I think most of our clients generally agree. They don't like paying taxes, but with any perspective, you have to agree that this is a low tax environment that we operate in today. And we all know the bills that this country has. More than likely, that is going to have to be dealt with higher tax rates. And people who have assets, who make income, are probably not going to find a friendlier tax environment over the next several decades.
Right? Yeah, we have a lot of clients who I've had this conversation with at least a dozen people. I'm patriotic, I believe in helping this country, but I don't want to pay more than I feel like I should. I don't want to just give extra money. But if you told that person, well, there's a way you can actually give less over time, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, we have clients today that are in RMD age, they're over 72, that are paying more tax on their required distributions than the tax percentage saved upon contribution. That is not, I assure you what they intended to do. When they
That's the
started
number
out
one
fund.
myth about the basic math
Right.
is, okay, I'm gonna retire in a lower tax bracket.
That's right.
Fortunately for a lot of our clients, that's not the case. If they
Right.
own a business or if they create a big income machine with their portfolio, they might have more income later than they did most of their career.
The irony is they were active savers early. And by being an active saver, they accumulated a high balance sheet, which created a high income, which offset the benefits
Yeah.
of their
Yeah.
contribution
Right.
to pre-tax.
Well, that kind of goes to the behavioral finance point that Andy was trying to bring up, I think, which is the big benefit of Roth I see is helping you equilibrate that working period with the retirement period. So in our working years, if our income's up here, in retirement year, if we have a normal job we're going to retire from, our income's low after
Yeah.
we retire. Let's say we do Roth, we take some dollars that we could be spending right now, spend them on tax, but the amount we're going to have in retirement to spend is higher. And also, when we lower this amount that we're spending each year, we train ourselves to live on less, and that's what you're describing.
Yeah.
Is we now need less to continue living our normal lifestyle.
Right.
And that's not hard. That's just paying yourself first, because most Americans and most of our clients as well tend to spend what they make, and what winds up in the bank account. If that bank account starts ticking up, we think, I do want to do that project in the house, or I do want to take the kids on that trip or something. So, anything we can do automatic,
Right.
that's the name of the game.
And purchasing power, we talked about that. So how many people have said, what's the maximum I can contribute? And let's back $500 off that. No one says that. It's what can I contribute? What's the maximum I can contribute? And just naturally you max it out and you check the box. You feel good.
Yeah.
Well, another benefit of Roth that goes in line with what you're saying is it gets more purchasing power in your account for the future. And emotionally, you still feel good about checking the box.
Yeah.
I think if we had somebody, my guess would be just naturally, and probably put ourselves in this box. If I'm maxing out a Roth and I go to max out a 401k with the thought process, save the difference, the net difference of what my take home income would be, few people would do that.
Yeah.
Very rarely.
I've never seen it,
Right.
frankly.
True.
Yeah.
So, it really, there's so many psychological benefits that go along
Yeah.
with it that just position each other,
Yeah.
position each person in a much better future scenario
Yeah.
where, ignoring tax rates, ignoring, market returns of what that tax could have been, just the psychological and behavioral finance outcomes position people in a much better
I mean, if
spot.
we sit down with two clients, same exact retirement account balances, one has 75% of their money in Roth, the other one has 0% of their money in Roth, which one's wealthier? I mean, there's an embedded tax liability in that pre-tax money. And, people, it's a unfortunate surprise to many when we sit down and we look at their 401ks that they've been funding for 20 and 30 years. And we say, oh, by the way, good job saving, but we probably you need to know that 20 or 30% of this is probably going to the government as we distribute that. So that's what we're really trying to do.
And even more so in the last couple of years with the Secure Act, forcing your IRA dollars in the next generation out in 10 years, because it really changes the math on that.
Yeah.
If the kids used to be able to take 2% every year, now they have to take 10, that could be a big deal, especially if they're already a high income earner.
Yeah.
So that almost has flipped how we think about these tax buckets. Your taxable money is going to get a full step up.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to be leaning into spending down the IRA dollars quicker than we might have prior to that change.
Let's talk about just some scenarios, just anecdotal scenarios we've dealt with clients. We've said tax arbitrage, or just basically we're looking for opportunities. Let's just speak specifically to some examples of clients we work with and where we've positioned. Maybe we brought up the concept of Roth. They never thought of themselves as sort of eligible to do that, but now they're full adopters of the idea.
Yeah, not naming any names. I had
Sure.
someone in here
No names.
very recently, and they had a death in the family in right around 69, 70. And right now, required minimum distributions don't have to come out until we're 72. So the idea here is we're retired, we have Social Security or pension or whatever our income is. That's pretty predictable. When we're 72, we're going to have to start taking income from our IRA. So that's your required minimum distribution. So the tax picture right now is some income, more income. So we had a window there of a lower tax environment. And we said, even though we can leave this inherited IRA for 10 years and let it be tax deferred, we distributed the whole thing in 1 year because they're going to be in a higher tax bracket next year. It's very easy math.
So we did that Secure Act talk.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's been 2 years ago now. But that is such an important concept that you said that, we could expand upon on a different day. I can think of two really good examples that we are in the process of doing with clients, that we've done with many clients. One being, and this is one of my favorite ones, is utilizing when you're in that pre-Social Security age. And most people, we encourage to defer Social Security until, as long as the markets are doing well, let's spend down our investments, let's defer the Social Security. It's nice to have that fixed income that's growing. But one area where it's been really beneficial for people is in that period where you're before Social Security, but you're retired and you have taxable money, spend your taxable money, convert your IRA money to Roth. So that in the future, these people are in their early, mid to late 60s. In the future, that money all grows tax-free, whereas otherwise it would have been subject to capital gains. You're reducing your R&D requirement. And to your point about the 10-year inherited time, you get 10 years of further tax-free benefit. So that's a huge advantage. Coupled onto that, then if you can do it in either way, but if the Roth is big enough to be material, you can segregate out how you invest the money. So if we think generally equities will outperform bonds, we can put our equities in this account that's tax-free and allow all of our big growth to occur there and our lesser growth to occur in the pre-tax money. So again, those are two concepts that literally yesterday and today we're doing for a client. We've done many times for clients. But it keeps, every time I do that, I always think back to you and I plugging away on Excel, big,
cracking the code.
Right. We're like, well, tax rates, but really it's not. When you start layering on all these things, it's just what we've all bought into. This is a no-brainer.
And one of the themes I come back to a lot in all different types of planning is flexibility.
Sure.
And you're creating flexibility there. You're creating a bucket that we don't need to think about the tax consequences of these trading decisions, because you're taking that taxable money, and the kids won't inherit it with a step up. But what if I'm in my 80s and 90s and all of a sudden I've got big embedded tax gains? That's not letting us be the best investor that we can.
I mean, the ultimate example that people have probably read about is Peter Thiel. I think it was his PayPal stock originally that he put in a Roth when it was private, and now he has a $5 billion Roth IRA.
Right.
That probably single-handedly will help change legislation in this country, unfortunately. And there probably will be some legislation that makes Roth less attainable for people. And that's even more reason that we need to be talking about this now, because I worry that some people say, well, I'll get to that in 5 years. I'll get to that in 10 years. We don't know if some of these opportunities will close or tighten up to where it makes it more difficult to implement these strategies.
That was, we're in a historically favorable Roth environment.
Right.
And when they publish the green book of their policy objectives every year, anytime it's in a blue administration, that's going to be on the chopping block, because when we think about people who can afford to pay tax they don't have to now, that's seen as a tool of the rich, when really what we see across our client base is it's a tool for almost every household that has income over 60,000-70,000. So I think that's probably an unfair perspective, but it doesn't mean that hasn't become the narrative on Capitol Hill.
And I think let's not forget 2010 was not that long ago. Before that, if you made over 100,000, you couldn't convert. So initially this was not allowed.
Right.
So it's slowly being absorbed. I think also we should mention large purchases. If somebody wants to, I was just trying to kind of make some notes, things that we've gone through, grandkids' colleges that want to be paid for, buying second house, taking a large family vacation, a car, whatever it may be. If you have this large purchase, then you start thinking about your break evens. That large purchase on top of your other income can easily push you in a higher tax bracket than you've ever been in.
Mortgage payoff, that retirement.
Mortgage paid off. Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you sat down with somebody and they have a accumulated retirement account balance. They're like, I want to pay off my mortgage when I retire. I say, here's the problem. If we take out that 150,000, you're adding 150,000 in income to
Right.
your
Yeah.
to your tax return.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do that over a number of years, whereas a Roth
Right.
would have no tax implications
Yeah.
to do that.
And I think your point of flexibility in an environment where we have so many unknowns, we've unknown with COVID, unknown with taxes, unknown with low interest rates, all these unknowns. Flexibility is key, right?
Yeah.
And flexibility will be key, I think, in the next 10 years from an investment standpoint.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Probably wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but talk a little bit more about sort of the timeline. When people think about Roth, and you mentioned maybe equities go there. Talk a little bit about how we see Roth fitting in. If it's not used for a lump sum, how it would generally fit into someone's cash flow plan.
Yeah, I think it can be done a couple different ways, and the way I've done it and we've done it. Definitely the benefit of accumulating in Roth is that you don't pay taxes on it. So more likely than not, it is one of the last buckets that we touch. That being said, it has flexibility. We can use it earlier. I think also, one thing we really want, it comes back to that converting, not necessarily spending out of an IRA, but creating a certain amount of income so that we're taking advantage of the lower tax brackets. So what we've done in some cases is spend up to a certain amount and then add on Roth money on top of that. But ultimately, however we structure that, we just want to try to be as tax favorable as possible and save for as long as possible the bucket that allows us to pay less tax.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in my 30s and I've been saving in a Roth since I started here. And when I think about our clients, we're building some amount of margin of safety in. Because everyone says, let's bounce our last check, but no one actually does that. That's dangerous. So when I think about my timeline, it's likely that every dollar I've saved today, I might not get to spending. That might be my margin of safety. So we have dollars here. My lifetime plus my spouse's lifetime plus 10 years might not come out. So those could be 80-year dollars.
Right.
So why not be pedal to the metal too?
Right.
Yeah.
We did have one question come in. What income tax rate do you pay on conversions?
Yeah.
You pay whatever income tax bracket you're in. And this is where the planning conversations become so critical. We get very involved. We're not CPAs, but we get very involved in optimizing people's tax plan.
Yeah.
And so it's a little difficult when you take all your tax documents to your CPA in the spring. We can't affect anything for 2021. We're already in the new calendar year. So in the year where we can impact something, that's why we're having this conversation now. We can talk to clients about how much they're eligible to convert. And it just, as if they were adding earned income to their tax return, they would be adding this to it. So it is important. And then there's other potential downsides to doing it. So we need to walk through exactly what we can do to
So
optimize.
you pay on your Roth conversion whatever your marginal tax rate is.
Yeah.
That's what the tax brackets are. And so I had a meeting this morning, so I have it fresh. So I know that it goes from 24 to 32% at about 340,000. So imagine we had a couple who had $280,000 of income we expected them to have this year. Now we have a $60,000 window that's in a more favorable tax bracket than it otherwise would be in the future if the income grows.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good starting point of this is the amount of money that we might think about being eligible to convert.
And I think that's a good question because it's also, we've met with people who have converted and we're like, well, why did you convert that amount? Well, I don't know. It's a nice round number.
Sounded good.
There's a lot of math that goes behind that because we're also talking about ordinary income taxes right now. And there's not all income is created the same. There's capital gains tax rates, there's dividend tax rates. So it's a complex decision, but one that can really be advantageous if you do it correctly.
Yeah.
I think it's time probably that we wrap it up. We really appreciate everyone joining us. Anything you want to say to close us out?
I'll just thank you all for watching and learning. Always lean on us. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We're happy to help. We hope you've enjoyed these type of videos. We're going to try to do more of them just to share more information about why we do what we do and what tools we have at our disposal to help really create value going up and above just investment management. So thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Okay.
I'm not sure we
I think
actually get to there.